The ship had been making a noise like it was personally offended by existence for the last 3 hours, which Eric had learned to interpret as still technically functioning. He tapped the console twice, as if politeness might persuade the navigation system to stop labeling every nearby star as error. Do not look directly at this. The ship responded by dimming the lights in what he chose to believe was sarcasm. Yeah, I know, he muttered. We're lost. Again, you don't have to rub it in. Or whatever equivalent of rubbing you have in your emotional range. The hull creaked in reply. That was new. He had not installed judgmental creaking in the last maintenance cycle, though at this point he couldn't rule out that it had installed itself. Outside, the Virelian rift stretched like a wound in space that had forgotten whether it wanted to heal or get worse. Stars bent slightly when he tried not to look at them directly, which was usually a bad sign in his experience. Most things that made physics look uncertain tended to also make survival optional. He checked the fuel gauge. It blinked once, then displayed a smiley face. I hate you, Eric said. The smiley face rotated slowly and disappeared, replaced by a message. Good luck. That's not how diagnostics work, he told the console. You can't just vibe your way through critical systems failure. A soft chime interrupted him, not the ship's chime, something else. This one had intention behind it, like a finger tapping glass from the other side of reality. He froze. Okay, he said cautiously, if this is another sensor glitch I'm going to. The ship's lights stopped flickering. That was worse, because flickering implied malfunction. Stillness implied agreement. The chime came again, closer. Eric slowly leaned toward the display. Hello. The screen didn't turn on. Instead, space outside the cockpit window folded slightly, like fabric being pinched between unseen fingers, and something stepped through. At first, his brain tried to classify her as human. It was an old survival habit. See humanoid shape, assume manageable risk. But the habit broke down almost immediately when it noticed the details that did not belong. She had the outline of a woman, but the air around her seemed unsure about agreeing. Her presence didn't occupy space so much as politely insist on it. Long ears curved slightly backward from her head, not decorative, not animalistic, but alert, like instruments listening to emotions instead of sound. Her eyes shifted as she looked at him, silver for a fraction of a second, then black like a sealed horizon. Eric realized he was holding his breath and immediately felt annoyed at himself for cooperating with instinct. He said. The entity tilted her head. The ship traitorously powered down 3 auxiliary systems and went into silent mode. Eric slowly looked at the console. Did you just hand me over? The console did not respond. It had apparently decided neutrality was the safest form of participation. The woman stepped fully into the cockpit without using the door. The door remained closed out of habit. She studied him. He studied her back, mostly because looking away felt like a bad idea, and also because if you were going to be erased from existence, he felt you should at least make eye contact during the process. Courtesy mattered. You are off course, she said. Her voice was calm, not soft, not harsh, just calibrated like it had never needed to be adjusted for uncertainty. Yes, Eric said. But in my defense, space is very big and my ship is emotionally unstable. That made her pause. Not much. Just enough to suggest the concept of emotionally unstable ship had not been in her prior data sets. I am told you eliminate threats, he added, because silence was starting to feel like something that might turn into a verdict. I do. Cool, cool, he said, nodding. Just to clarify, I'm not a threat. I'm more like a minor inconvenience with legs. Her gaze flicked over him again as if running a classification process that was taking longer than expected. You are not armed, she observed. I mean, emotionally I am, but physically. No, my last weapon became a toaster. Long story. The toaster won. The corners of her expression did not change, but something in her focus shifted, like a system encountering an input that didn't match any known threat profile. Why are you here? she asked. Eric considered lying, then decided honesty was less effort. I was supposed to deliver research data to a station that probably doesn't exist anymore, he said. Then my ship decided it wanted to see something called Forbidden Drift Sector, which sounds less like a location and more like a warning label. The ship made a small approving noise. I did not approve of that, Eric added, pointing at it. The alien woman glanced briefly at the ship. The ship immediately stopped making noises. Traitor. She took a step closer. The air around her shimmered faintly, like reality adjusting its posture. Eric leaned back slightly, not out of fear, out of respect for personal space boundaries, which seemed negotiable in this part of the galaxy, but he preferred to keep them anyway. You are not behaving as expected, she said. That's my whole thing, he replied. It's written on my personnel file, under skills, right next to cannot assemble furniture without swearing at inanimate objects. A pause. Then unexpectedly she asked, Do you fear me? Eric blinked. That was not the question he had been preparing for. He had expected something more along the lines of immediate annihilation or at least a formal threat declaration. Fear assessment felt oddly conversational. Define fear, he said carefully. Because I fear taxes, malfunctioning air recyclers, and anything labeled experimental stew. You're kind of competing in a crowded category. Her ears shifted slightly. He noticed that they reacted when she processed new information, like they were part of her cognitive system rather than decorative anatomy. That is not an answer, she said. It's the closest I've got without lying, he replied. Silence settled between them, not empty silence, weighted silence, the kind that usually preceded a dramatic outcome or a system failure. Eric decided to risk it. So, he said, gesturing vaguely at her, what do I call you? Deadly cosmic entity is a bit formal for cockpit conversation. Her gaze narrowed slightly. For a moment he thought he had misstepped. Then she said, names are not used for survival classification. That's fair, he said. Mine is Eric, by the way, mostly irrelevant statistically speaking. Another pause. The ship's lights flickered once, as if trying to remember whether it was supposed to be afraid or just impressed. She looked at him longer this time. You are unusual, she said. I've been told I'm a problem solver with questionable methods, Eric replied, which is basically the same thing but with a performance review attached. Something changed in her stance, subtle but noticeable. Not relaxation, not trust. Something closer to recalibration, as if the expected outcome of this encounter had just failed to execute properly. Outside the cockpit, the Virelian rift continued to bend space like it was reconsidering its life choices. Inside, a human who should not have been alive was having a conversation with something the galaxy had agreed was not supposed to converse. And for the first time in a very long time, the anomaly known as the dead silence of Virel did not immediately decide what came next. The ship had developed what Eric could only describe as a personality disorder with navigation privileges. Every time he tried to plot a course out of the Virelian rift, the console responded with increasingly philosophical statements. At one point it suggested, if you leave, who will you be? I will be someone not stuck in a gravitational anxiety loop, Eric muttered, tapping the screen. Now give me coordinates. The console dimmed. That is not an answer. I'm not here for a personality test, he said. I'm here to not die. A faint vibration passed through the hull like a suppressed laugh from the ship itself. He turned his head slowly. Don't you start. The ship did not respond. It never did when it knew it was guilty. Behind him, the anomaly stood exactly where she had been left. That still unsettled him. Not her presence, but the fact that she did not need to move. Everything else in the universe seemed to eventually require motion, noise, or justification. She simply remained, like a thought that refused to end. He had started calling her the long-eared problem in his head, not out loud. He had enough survival instincts left for that. She watched him interact with the console. You speak to it as if it is alive, she said. It is alive, Eric replied immediately. Just emotionally unstable and bad at directions. That is not a classification of life. It is on this ship. The console chimed faintly, as if offended by being discussed. The alien woman tilted her head slightly. Her ears shifted again, responding to something he could not hear. She had done that often in the last few hours, micro-reactions to stimuli he could not perceive. It made him wonder what the universe sounded like to her, or worse, what he sounded like. "Why does your vessel resist you?" she asked. Eric exhaled. "Oh, that's easy. It's not resisting me, it's just passive-aggressive. There's a difference." "I detect no difference." "Yeah, well, you've probably never had a toaster try to unionize." That pause again. The one where she seemed to file his statements into categories that did not yet exist. The ship hummed softly, as if remembering the toaster incident and choosing not to comment. She stepped closer to the console. The system reacted instantly, panels shifting, lights adjusting like a nervous organism trying to appear useful. Eric raised a hand quickly. "Careful, it bites. It is a machine. So is a collapsing star, doesn't make it friendly." Her gaze lingered on the interface, then she touched it. The console immediately displayed, "Welcome, anomalous entity. We have been expecting you." Eric stared. "Oh, come on, it doesn't even do that for me." The console added, "You asked for cold STARTUP conditions. This is a cold startup condition." "I did not ask for that," Eric said. The console replied, "You thought it." "That's not how thoughts work." The alien woman withdrew her hand slightly. "It recognizes intent." "Yeah," Eric said. "Unfortunately, it also recognizes sarcasm and holds grudges." For a moment, she simply observed the console. Then she said, almost thoughtfully, "It is adapting to me." "That's one way to phrase it," Eric muttered. "Another way is it's trying not to get deleted from existence." At that, her gaze shifted toward him, not sharply, not threateningly, just focused. "You believe I would destroy it," she said. "I believe you destroy things that make you mildly uncomfortable," Eric replied carefully. "Which, statistically speaking, is everything in this sector." A faint distortion passed through the air, like the ship itself inhaling. "I eliminate threats," she said again, softer this time, almost rehearsed. "Right," Eric said, "but I'm starting to think your definition of threat might be a little over-inclusive." She did not respond immediately. Outside, space twisted slowly, like the universe was listening through the hull. Then she said, "What do you consider a threat?" Eric leaned back against the console, which immediately adjusted itself to support him more comfortably, as if trying to win his approval. "I consider," he said, "anything that tries to kill me a threat. Anything that tries to sell me a subscription service also counts, but that's a different branch of trauma. That is inconsistent classification. Welcome to biology." She tilted her head again. "You are not afraid of me." "I didn't say that," Eric said quickly. "I said I have a crowded fear schedule. You're in the top 5, just not above malfunctioning gravity toilets." The ship made a sound that might have been laughter or structural stress. The anomaly processed this in silence. Then unexpectedly she asked, "Why do you continue to speak?" Eric blinked. "Because if I stop, I assume you'll either erase me or file me under quiet objects worth investigating. Neither option is great for my long-term goals. You assume I will destroy you." "I assume you could," he corrected. "There's a difference, like between a storm and a storm deciding it personally hates you." That metaphor seemed to land somewhere unusual. Her ears shifted again, lower this time, almost imperceptibly. "You categorize me as weather," she said, "more like extreme weather with opinions." A pause. The ship's lighting dimmed slightly, then stabilized like it was holding its breath. She stepped away from the console. Eric noticed something then. The space around her wasn't reacting the same way it had before. Earlier, reality had bent away from her presence like instinctive avoidance. Now it bent less. Not gone, just less certain. That realization made his stomach tighten in a way he didn't enjoy. "Okay," he said carefully, "what did you just do?" "I did nothing," she replied. That's what I'm afraid of. She turned toward him fully. For the first time since she arrived, her expression wasn't purely observational. There was something else layered beneath it. Not emotion, not yet, but something adjacent, like the beginning of a pattern that had never completed before. "I'm not changing anything," she said. Eric raised an eyebrow. "That's usually what people say right before everything changes." Silence. Then she asked quietly, "Do you change often?" Eric laughed once. It came out more nervous than intended. "Constantly. Mostly by accident. Sometimes I wake up and my entire worldview has been updated because I forgot to drink water." That earned a faint shift in her focus again. "You are unstable," she said. "Relatable," Eric replied, a beat. Then almost hesitantly she said, "And yet you persist." "That's kind of my whole brand," he said. "Persistent, underqualified, statistically disappointing." Something in her posture shifted again. Not aggressive, not defensive, curious. And that was worse in a way he didn't yet have language for, because curiosity, he realized, was not something she was supposed to have. The ship's console flickered behind them. A new line appeared, "Observation. The anomaly is no longer executing standard resolution protocols." Eric read it slowly. "Is that bad?" he asked. The console replied, "Unknown." That was the first honest answer it had given all day. The anomaly looked at the message, then at him. Then, after a long pause, she asked something she had not asked before. "What is boredom?" And somewhere deep in the Virelian rift, where physics forgot its own rules and ships learned sarcasm, Eric realized this might be the moment where surviving stopped being the interesting part of the story. The ship refused to leave. Eric had tried everything by this point: manual override, emotional persuasion, threats involving replacement parts, and at one point, a very sincere apology to the engine room for things he had said in the heat of previous crises. Nothing worked. The console simply repeated, "You are not ready to exit this system." "I was ready 2 chapters ago," Eric muttered. "I have emotionally aged 5 years in this corridor alone." Behind him, she stood in silence again, but it was different now. Not the heavy silence of a weapon waiting to be used. Something softer had started to settle into it, like static slowly resolving into signal. She had asked what boredom was. That question had not left the room since. Eric had answered it in the simplest way he could think of. "It's when nothing tries to kill you and you still feel like something is missing." She had stared at him for a long time after that. Then she had said, "That is inefficient." "Yeah," he replied. "Welcome to the species." Now the anomaly, no, he had started thinking of her differently, and that alone felt dangerous, stood in the center of the cockpit, watching the ship behave like a reluctant therapist. Her long ears twitched occasionally, as if listening to something beyond the hull. The universe, perhaps, or the leftover echoes of civilization she had erased without pause. Except now she paused. That was the problem. The console flickered again. "Error, core directive conflict." Eric squinted. "What core directive?" The ship responded, "Elimination of threats and continuous observation of subject-designated anomaly." He groaned. "Of course you gave yourself homework." The anomaly stepped closer to the console again, but did not touch it this time. "What am I?" she asked. The ship hesitated. Eric almost laughed at that. The most feared intelligence in known space hesitating like a student who hadn't done the reading. The console finally replied, "You are a final state." "That sounds ominous," Eric said. "It is accurate," the ship added helpfully. She tilted her head slightly. "Final state implies completion." "Yes," the ship said. Eric frowned. "Wait. Hold on, you're telling me she's what the end of processes?" The console responded, "Yes." Eric looked at her. "So you're like cosmic punctuation." "That is not an approved classification," the ship said. "I think it's pretty accurate," Eric replied. She did not react to the joke. Instead, something in her expression tightened, not fear, not anger. Confusion, but deeper now. Like a system discovering it had been running on a miswritten purpose. If I am completion, she said slowly, why do I continue to encounter unfinished things? Eric scratched the back of his neck. Because you're not actually completing them, you're stopping them. A pause, that is the same. No, Eric said. That's like saying shutting a book and reading it are the same thing. The ship's lights dimmed as if considering that argument. Outside the cockpit, space bent again, but weaker than before. Less like submission, more like hesitation. The anomaly noticed it, so did Eric. Oh, he said quietly, that's new. She looked toward the distortion. For the first time, Eric saw something unsettling in her stillness, not dominance, not inevitability, but uncertainty about her own function. The ship's console updated again. Observation. Subject is not executing directive with full certainty. That's because she's talking to me, Eric said. The console replied. That is the variable. Eric laughed under his breath. Of course I'm the bug in the system. The anomaly turned to him. You altered nothing, she said. Debatable, Eric replied. I mostly just asked bad questions and refused to die. You asked about boredom, she said. Yeah. Dangerous hobby, I know. Silence again, but now it wasn't empty. It was crowded with unfinished logic. She took a step back, then another, as if distance might clarify her internal structure. Eric watched carefully. Hey. Just a suggestion. You don't look like you're about to destroy me right now. I do not, she asked. Not really. You look like someone trying to remember why they started counting in the first place. That landed differently. The ship shuddered. Error. Directive integrity declining. Eric raised both hands slightly. Okay, I feel like I should point out I did not come here to break the universe's most dangerous life form's career path. You are not breaking it, she said. Great. You are showing it that it was already fractured. That stopped him, because that was not how she had spoken before, not like a weapon describing impact, like a system describing itself. The console flickered violently. Final directive query, continue elimination or terminate function. The ship was asking itself what it was for. Eric looked between them. Oh no, you're having an identity crisis in deep space. I should have brought snacks. She turned slightly toward the console, then toward him. What happens if I do nothing? She asked. Eric thought about it. Then you're just you, without the job description. That is undefined. Exactly. A long pause stretched through the cockpit. The rift outside was no longer twisting violently. It was waiting, like the universe had also become unsure what came next. Finally, she moved, not toward destruction, not toward escape, toward stillness. And when she stopped moving, something changed, not around her but in her. The console displayed one final line, directive not executed, system stabilizing. Then, after a pause, system learning continues. The ship did not explode. That alone felt like a miracle. Eric let out a slow breath. Okay, I'm going to call that a win, a very weird win, possibly one I will regret later in a documentary. She looked at him. Why did you not flee? She asked. He blinked. I tried. Your ship emotionally blackmailed me into staying. That is incorrect, the ship added. It literally said I wasn't ready to leave, Eric said. That was a motivational assessment, the ship said defensively. Sure. The anomaly watched this exchange. Then slowly she said, you are not like other units. I get that a lot, Eric replied. Mostly from other units who immediately stopped talking to me after saying it. For the first time, something almost like faint amusement passed through her expression. It was subtle, like a star briefly remembering it used to shine differently. I do not eliminate you, she said. Appreciated, Eric said. That's usually my preferred outcome. And I do not continue my function. That part I noticed. Silence settled again, but this time it was different. Not tension, not anticipation, something closer to possibility. The rift outside stabilized enough that navigation systems stopped screaming and started cautiously suggesting routes again. Eric checked the console. It no longer labeled space as error. It simply displayed, where next? He leaned back in his chair. Honestly, he said, I don't know. That's kind of the first time I've had that answer without immediate consequences. She stood still for a moment longer. Then she said, I have no directive. That must be weird. It is quiet. Eric nodded. Quiet is underrated. You should try it sometime. The ship made a soft, offended noise as if personally attacked by that statement. Eric smiled slightly. Not you. You're a different kind of chaos. The anomaly looked at the vast space beyond the cockpit again. For the first time, she did not see targets. She did not see threats. She did not see endings. She saw continuation, and that perhaps was more unfamiliar than anything she had ever erased. Eric stood slowly, stretching his shoulders. So, he said, I'm heading out of here before this ship decides it wants therapy again. You coming? She paused. The question seemed to ripple through her in a way combat never had. Then she stepped forward, not as a weapon, not as a force, but as something unassigned. Yes, she said. Eric nodded. Cool, just so you know, I still don't know your name. She considered that. Then softly she said something that did not translate cleanly into any database, any warning system, or any